The void, a canvas of nothingness, an endless expanse where existence seemed to dissolve. No light, only the suffocating pressure of oblivion. The Anti-Monitor's wrath was absolute. He consumed countless worlds, leaving a silent testament. 7 figures stood defiant against the nothingness. The Paragons, the last hope of existence. The silence of the void was a deafening roar. It pressed against their eardrums, a constant reminder of the unimaginable destruction that had transpired. Each Paragon, lost in their own thoughts, grappled with the immensity of their loss. The weight of countless lives extinguished, of dreams shattered and futures erased, threatened to crush their spirits. Blue Lantern. Michael, his heart heavy with the collective grief of a universe, closed his eyes, desperately seeking a flicker of hope in the echoing emptiness. His ring, fueled by the power of hope, pulsed faintly on his finger, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. But even his unwavering optimism flickered in the face of such utter annihilation.
The void holds no answers, only the chilling finality of our predicament. Dwelling on the past serves no purpose. Our only solace, our only hope, lies in finding a way forward, in defying the odds and somehow rebuilding from the ashes.
They were an unlikely group, these 7 souls drawn together by fate. Heroes and villains, pragmatists and dreamers, their paths had converged in this desolate wasteland, united by a common purpose. Each carried the weight of their past, the scars of battles fought and lost, the echoes of worlds destroyed. Yet, in this shared burden, they found strength.
I've seen my share of battles, faced down countless enemies, but nothing could have prepared me for the utter desolation of the void. Yet I refuse to yield to despair. I will fight alongside these strangers, these unlikely allies, until my last breath.
Shaggy Rogers, his usual goofiness replaced by a haunted look, trembled beside him. The trauma of losing his friends, of witnessing the destruction of his world, had shaken him to his core. He felt utterly out of his depth, a reluctant participant in a cosmic struggle he barely understood. Yet, deep down, a flicker of courage remained, fueled by the memory of his fallen comrades. Through the swirling chaos, a flicker of something solid appeared, a mirage in the endless expanse of nothingness. As they drew closer, the outlines of buildings solidified. Streets paved with cracked asphalt stretched before them. A playground stood eerily silent, swings swaying gently. Was it a cruel trick, a figment of their imagination? Or could it be a sanctuary, a temporary respite?
We need shelter, a place to regroup and plan. Perhaps this forgotten town holds the key to our survival.
The abandoned town pressed in on them, its emptiness a suffocating presence. Michael and Tenten felt the weight of the silence settle upon their shoulders. It was a silence unlike any other, devoid of the comforting hum of life. Here, there was only the unsettling stillness of a world forgotten. Michael's blue ring cast an eerie glow as he set up camp. Tenten began to assess their surroundings. She noted the crumbling walls and creaking floorboards. As they worked, a strange sense of camaraderie began to form between them. Perhaps it was the shared burden of their mission, the feeling of being the last remnants of a shattered universe. But a connection sparked between the stoic assassin and the hopeful lantern. Michael, catching Tenten's eye, offered a tired smile.
This place is...
He hesitated, searching for the right words.
Eerie.
Tenten finished, her voice flat, devoid of her usual sarcasm. She met his gaze, and for a moment, a flicker of understanding passed between them. They were both carrying the weight of countless lost lives, the burden of a universe on their shoulders.
We'll bring it back, you know,
Michael said, his voice filled with quiet conviction.
The multiverse, all of it.
Tenten nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She didn't share his unwavering optimism, But in that moment, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. If anyone could pull off this impossible task, it would be the seven of them, united against a common enemy. Meanwhile, Hawkgirl, her wings furled tightly against her back, stalked through the deserted streets. Her keen eyes scanned the empty buildings, searching for anything that could be of use. The town, though seemingly untouched by time, held an unsettling stillness. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished, leaving behind their belongings, their memories, their lives. She entered a dilapidated grocery store, its shelves bare except for a few dusty cans and cobwebbed boxes. The air was thick with the smell of decay, the silence broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. Each step was a reminder of the immense task ahead, the daunting reality of rebuilding a universe from scratch. But Hawkgirl was a survivor. She had faced down countless threats, stared death in the face, and emerged victorious. The Anti-Monitor had thrown his most devastating attack at them, but they were still standing. As long as they had each other, as long as they held on to hope, they had a fighting chance. Back at the makeshift camp, Pietro Maximoff, a whirlwind of nervous energy, paced the confines of the small living room. He had arrived with Panthro, Shaggy, and Frieza in tow, the tension crackling between them like a live wire. The weight of their predicament, the enormity of their task, hung heavy in the air. Panthro. "This is it then? This is where we make our stand?" Panthro rumbled, his voice deep and resonant, breaking the tense silence. He surveyed their surroundings, his gaze lingering on the boarded-up windows, the crumbling walls. Even this pale imitation of civilization felt unnervingly fragile in the face of the void's emptiness. Frieza. A pathetic last stand, if you ask me, hiding away in this crumbling hovel. "Is this the extent of your grand plan?" Frieza, his arms crossed, scoffed. He looked at Michael, his eyes narrowed, a challenge in their depths. "Frieza, I had expected better from a paragon of hope." Michael, ignoring Frieza's jab, turned to the others, his expression serious. "Michael, this is where we gather our strength. This is where we plan our next move." He met each of their gazes, drawing strength from their presence, their shared determination. "Michael, the Anti-Monitor may have destroyed our universes, but he hasn't destroyed our spirit. He hasn't destroyed our hope." He held up his hand, his blue ring pulsing with a vibrant light, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. "Michael, we are the Paragons. We are the protectors of the multiverse. And we will not fall here. We will not let him win." A heavy silence followed his words, broken only by the sound of their own breathing. The air crackled with anticipation, the quiet before the storm. An uneasy truce settled over the group. The Paragons grappled with the weight of their shared purpose. Each harbored doubts, fears, and lingering scars. Yet, they clung to a fragile hope to defy the odds. Panthro, ever vigilant, scanned their surroundings. He recognized the tension simmering beneath the surface. Their shared enemy forged a bond stronger than any oath. Shaggy, haunted, huddled in a corner, eyes darting nervously. He wouldn't let them down. Michael, sensing the unease that permeated the room, drew himself up, his blue ring pulsing with a soft, reassuring light. He had always been a beacon of hope, even in the darkest of times. Now, faced with the impossible task of rebuilding the multiverse, his resolve solidified into quiet determination. "We may be an unlikely group," he began, his voice calm yet firm, cutting through the tension that hung heavy in the air, brought together by fate and circumstance. "But we are united by a common purpose. The Anti-Monitor seeks to extinguish all life. to consume all that is and ever will be. He may have taken our worlds, he continued, his voice gaining strength, resonating with the power of his convictions, but he will not take our spirit. We will stand against him. We will fight for every life lost, every dream shattered. We will rebuild what was taken. We will not allow him to win. Frieza, his arms crossed, a sardonic smirk playing on his lips, surveyed the scene with undisguised amusement. The notion of sacrificing himself for the greater good, of fighting for a universe he considered beneath him, struck him as utterly absurd.
"Such noble sentiments," he drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm, for a group of pathetic weaklings facing inevitable oblivion. "Tell me, Paragon of Hope, do you truly believe this charade of resistance will amount to anything more than a fleeting annoyance to the Anti-Monitor?"
Sacrifice? He scoffed, his voice laced with disdain. I have built empires, raised planets, and instilled fear in the hearts of entire galaxies. I do not sacrifice, I conquer. He turned his gaze on Michael, his eyes narrowed, a challenge in their depths. If you believe I would willingly throw away my life for this sentimental crusade, you are sorely mistaken. Hawkgirl, sensing an opportunity to sway the volatile tyrant, stepped forward, her wings unfurling slightly, a hint of steel in her voice. She knew that appealing to Frieza's better nature was a fool's errand, but his ego, his insatiable hunger for power and recognition, that was a weakness she could exploit.
"You underestimate the significance of this fight, Frieza," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through his arrogance. The Anti-Monitor's defeat would resonate throughout the multiverse, across every timeline and every reality. The legends of those who stood against him, who defied him at the end of all things, would be etched in the fabric of existence.
Imagine, she continued, her voice laced with a hint of sly persuasion, the tales they will tell, the monuments they will build in your honor. Frieza, the destroyer of worlds and the savior of the multiverse. Your name, whispered in awe and reverence by generations to come. Section 5. The calm before the storm. A moment of unity. A tense silence descended upon the room. The Paragons, their gazes fixed on Frieza, held their breath. The fate of their mission hung in the balance. For a moment, a sense of unity settled over the group. They were 7 beings, bound by a common enemy. Section 1. A tremor in the void. A tremor ran through the abandoned town, a subtle vibration that resonated deep within their bones. The air, thick with tension and anticipation, crackled with a sudden surge of energy. The Paragons, their fragile unity shattered, instinctively reached for their weapons, their gazes drawn to the boarded-up windows, the flimsy barriers that separated them from the endless void. Michael, his blue ring pulsing with a frantic energy, felt a cold dread grip his heart. The Anti-Monitor was close. He could sense the entity's malevolent presence pressing against the edges of his mind, a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume all light and hope. Panthro, his leonine senses on high alert, let out a low growl, his claws extending with a metallic rasp.
"He's here," he rumbled, his voice a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the tense silence. "The destroyer comes."
His words, spoken with a chilling certainty, sent a shiver down Shaggy's spine. Section 2. The Anti-Monitor's arrival, a harbinger of doom. The boarded-up windows exploded inward, showering the room in splintered wood and shards of glass. A wave of raw power, of pure, unadulterated antimatter energy, slammed into the Paragons, throwing them back against the walls like rag dolls. The air crackled and popped with an eerie violet light. the very fabric of reality groaning under the strain of the Anti-Monitor's presence. He stood framed in the shattered window, a colossal figure wreathed in shadow and crackling energy. His armor, once gleaming white, was now a sickly gray, scarred and scorched from countless battles across the ravaged multiverse. His eyes, cold and pitiless, burned with an insatiable hunger, a desire to consume all of existence. The Anti-Monitor surveyed the scene, his gaze lingering on each of the Paragons, drinking in their fear, their defiance. A low, rumbling laugh escaped his lips, a sound that seemed to echo across the void itself, a chilling testament to his power. "You have interfered for the last time," the Anti-Monitor boomed, his voice a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the abandoned town. "The multiverse will be mine. All of existence will bow before me." He raised a hand, his fingers crackling with antimatter energy, ready to unleash his wrath. Michael, pushing himself to his feet, his body aching from the force of the Anti-Monitor's arrival, knew they had to act fast. Every second they could delay the inevitable. Every moment they could hold the Anti-Monitor's attention could be the difference between oblivion and a sliver of hope for the ravaged multiverse. "Paragons!" he shouted, his voice barely audible above the Anti-Monitor's booming laughter. "Now, we distract him. Buy me some time. We have to make him pay for every inch of ground." Panthro, a roar ripping from his throat, charged forward, his claws bared, a whirlwind of fur and fury. Pietro, a blur of motion, circled the Anti-Monitor, a barrage of energy blasts erupting from his hands, a desperate attempt to distract the colossal being. Hawkgirl, her wings beating furiously, soared into the air, her mace glowing with a fierce intensity, ready to strike from above. The Anti-Monitor, amused by their futile resistance, swatted them aside like insects. Panthro slammed into a wall, his body crumpled and broken. Pietro, his movements slowing, a look of despair on his face, was caught in a grip of antimatter energy, his cries of agony echoing through the void. "I told you, you are nothing to me," the Anti-Monitor sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. He raised his hand again, ready to deliver the final blow, to extinguish the last flickering embers of resistance. Frieza, his eyes blazing with a cold fury, unleashed a torrent of energy, blasts a blinding barrage of raw power that slammed into the Anti-Monitor's chest, forcing the colossal being to stagger back a step. Tenten, as Tenten. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice tight with strain as she channeled her powers, her energy mending his broken bones, soothing his wounds. The Anti-Monitor, enraged by this unexpected defiance, turned his attention to Frieza, his eyes burning with a cold fury. "Anti-Monitor, you dare?" he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the void itself. "You dare challenge me?" The battle raged, a chaotic whirlwind of energy blasts, clashing weapons, and desperate cries. The Paragons, their bodies pushed to the limit, fought with a ferocity born of despair, knowing that the fate of the multiverse hung in the balance. But the Anti-Monitor was relentless, his power seemingly limitless, his every blow shaking the very fabric of existence. One by one, the Paragons fell. Hawkgirl, her wings shredded, her body broken, crashed to the ground, her mace clattering uselessly on the pavement. Panthro, his strength finally failing, slumped against a wall, his eyes flickering closed. Frieza, his energy reserves depleted, his body scarred and scorched, collapsed to his knees, his defiant spirit finally broken. Frieza, as Frieza. "This is the end," he gasped, his voice raspy and weak, a flicker of fear in his eyes as the anti-monitor loomed over him, his hand raised for the final blow. Shaggy watched in terror as his companions fell, one after another, their bodies broken, their spirits crushed beneath the heel of the anti-monitor's might. His heart pounded in his chest, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the chaos unfolding around him. He wanted to run, to hide, to escape the overwhelming terror that threatened to consume him. He remembered the car accident, the sickening crunch of metal, the screams that echoed in the night. The memory of losing Fred, Velma, and Scooby-Doo, their laughter silenced, their lives extinguished in an instant, sent a wave of grief and guilt crashing over him. He was supposed to be the paragon of courage, the embodiment of unwavering bravery. But in that moment, as the anti-monitor loomed over them, his shadow stretching across the shattered remnants of their hope, Shaggy felt only fear. A strangled cry escaped his lips as the anti-monitor turned his attention to Tenten, his eyes burning with a cold, merciless light. Shaggy watched as the anti-monitor was about to step on Tenten, but before the anti-monitor could, Michael charged underneath and created a blue force field around himself and Tenten. The blue force field barely holding up against crushing weight of the anti-monitor's foot. The weight of the anti-monitor foot would slowly begin to crack the force field. Shaggy would stare at them as he stood frozen in fear. Shaggy couldn't let them die, not like this. He had to do something, anything to save them. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, searching for that hidden reserve of power. He thought of his friends, and a surge of determination coursed through his veins. The anti-monitor paused, sensing a sudden surge of energy from Shaggy. He turned his gaze on the unlikely hero, his brow furrowed in confusion. Frieza, his eyes widening in disbelief, stared at Shaggy. The rise of Ultra Instinct. Shaggy. Shaggy's body crackled with unseen energy, his form shifting, blurring at the edges. Reality seemed to bend and distort under the power surging through him. His hair stood on end, and an ethereal aura enveloped his trembling form. The anti-monitor watched in wary fascination. He sensed a spark of potential within Shaggy, who had tapped into a wellspring of hidden power. A desperate plea. Tenten's moment of truth. Tenten, her body still aching from the anti-monitor's previous attack, watched in stunned silence as Shaggy underwent his transformation. A glimmer of hope, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness, sparked within her. Could this be the turning point, the miracle they so desperately needed?
Shaggy, you can do this. We know you can. We believe in you. We all do. The blue force field around Michael and Tenten was beginning to shatter. Michael would turn his head, turns Tenten and Than to Shaggy. Michael would shout, "Listen to her, Shaggy!"
Her words, though faint, seemed to echo through the void, carrying with them the weight of a universe's hopes and dreams. Her words, reaching Shaggy through the haze of power coursing through him, seemed to anchor him, to ground him in the midst of the storm raging within. He opened his eyes, and Tenten gasped. Gone were the pupils, replaced by a serene silver light, a depth of power that seemed to see into the very essence of her being. The tide turns, a glimmer of hope in the void. Shaggy moved with a speed that defied comprehension, a blur of motion that left the anti-monitor momentarily disoriented. One moment he was standing before them, a trembling, terrified human. The next, he was a whirlwind of silver energy, his attacks landing with a speed and precision that belied his previous clumsiness. Shaggy's attack knocked the anti-monitor back just as the Michael's blue force field shattered. The anti-monitor, caught off guard, staggered back, a roar of surprise and anger ripping from his throat. He lashed out with a wave of antimatter energy. But Shaggy, his movements fluid and effortless, simply flowed around it, his fist connecting with the anti-monitor's jaw, sending the colossal being reeling. The other Paragons, their bodies battered and broken, watched in stunned silence as the tide of the battle turned. Hope, so recently extinguished, flickered back to life, fueled by Shaggy's impossible display of power. United we stand. The Paragons regroup. What? What is this power? Panthro breathed, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. He had faced countless enemies in his lifetime, witnessed feats of strength and skill that defied explanation. But nothing could have prepared him for the raw, primal energy radiating from Shaggy Rogers. Tenten, her gaze fixed on Shaggy's transformed form, felt a surge of admiration course through her. She had always prided herself on her pragmatism, her ability to assess a situation and act accordingly, to rely on logic and strategy rather than blind faith. But in that moment, as she watched Shaggy battle the anti-monitor, his movements a blur of silver light, she realized that logic had its limits. There were forces at play in the universe, powers beyond their comprehension, that defied explanation, that transcended the boundaries of reason. And sometimes, all it took was a single spark of hope, a flicker of belief in the impossible, to ignite a fire that could burn down even the darkest of shadows. The fury of a god. Frieza's disbelief and awe. Frieza, his pride wounded, watched the battle unfold with disbelief and rage. A cowardly mere mortal wielding a power that dwarfed his own. Shaggy, a conduit for a force that warped reality, filled him with cold fury. Was he truly the apex predator he believed himself to be? The tide had turned. Shaggy, empowered by Ultra Instinct, moved with a speed and precision that defied comprehension. He was a blur of silver energy, his attacks landing with devastating force against the stunned anti-monitor. The void itself seemed to tremble with each blow, as if reality itself strained to contain the power unleashed. Seeing Shaggy's transformation, the other Paragons, battered and bruised but not broken, felt a surge of hope ignite within their hearts. If Shaggy could stand against the anti-monitor, if he could push back the darkness, then so could they. They would not fall here, not while a single spark of defiance remained. With renewed determination, the Paragons rose to join the fight. Panthro, his body healed by Tenten, roared with defiance, his claws slashing through the anti-monitor's defenses. Hawkgirl, her wings mended, soared through the air, her mace a blur of motion as she hammered at the colossal being's armor. Pietro, freed from his antimatter prison, moved like lightning, a barrage of energy blasts finding their mark. Tenten would be helped to her feet by Michael. Tenten would hold out two katanas as Michael's blue lantern ring would glow bright with blue energy. The Paragons were finally united in strength, in power, in purpose, in unity. The anti-monitor, his energy reserves depleted, his armor shattered, stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning fear. He had consumed countless universes, extinguished trillions of lives, and yet here, at the edge of oblivion, he was being defeated by a handful of beings he considered insignificant. With a final earth-shattering roar, the anti-monitor exploded, his essence dissolving into motes of light that scattered across the void. The darkness that had cloaked the multiverse began to recede, the remnants of shattered reality swirling and coalescing, drawn together by an unseen force. The Monitor, his form shimmering into existence, observed the scene with a sense of profound satisfaction. The Paragons had succeeded where countless others had failed. They had faced down the ultimate evil and emerged victorious, their courage and determination a testament to the indomitable spirit of the multiverse. "You have done well," the monitor intoned, his voice echoing through the void, a symphony of 1,000 voices blended into one. "You have defied fate, challenged oblivion, and emerged triumphant. The multiverse will forever bear the mark of your heroism." He approached each of the Paragons, his gaze lingering on their weary faces. "Though you asked for nothing in return for your sacrifice," he continued, "I offer you this small token of my gratitude." He extended his hand, and in his palm, 7 shimmering watches materialized, each one pulsing with a faint, ethereal light. "These watches," the monitor explained, "will allow you to traverse the barriers between universes, to visit one another whenever you wish. Consider it a reminder of the bond you forged here, in the face of oblivion." And so, with heavy hearts but spirits soaring, the Paragons bid farewell to the void. Their journey's end marked not by sorrow, but by celebration. They had stared into the abyss, faced their deepest fears, and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. They had saved the multiverse, and in doing so, had forged a bond that transcended time and space. The abandoned town, their sanctuary in the midst of chaos, shimmered and faded, reabsorbed into the fabric of a reborn universe. The Paragons found themselves standing on a grassy hilltop, a feast laid out before them beneath a sky ablaze with 1,000 stars. They ate, they drank, they shared stories of their adventures, their laughter echoing across the hilltop, a symphony of joy and camaraderie. They were heroes, each and every one of them, their names forever etched in the annals of the multiverse. They were the Paragons: Michael, Tenten, Panthro, Shaggy, Pietro, Frieza, and Hawkgirl. And their legend had only just begun.